Hello and welcome to a new episode of Leadership Lanes. Today we have Michael Colella with us, and he'll be talking to us about making an impact via analytics. Michael is a seasoned business and engineering leader, overseeing BI, analytics engineering, and web analytics while also teaching at the University of Chicago. He spent time as a chief data scientist and technology leader at Boston Consulting Group's Advanced Analytics and AI Powerhouse, which is Gamma. Michael is passionate about helping teams implement advanced analytics and AI solutions to drive business value. Welcome to the podcast, Michael. Looking forward for this.
Thanks, Abhijit. Yeah, thank you for the introduction. And yeah, super excited to be here. So good to see you.
So to start with, recently I was talking to one of my mentors, and he told me that data needs to punch people in the face. What is your opinion on this?
Yeah, that's interesting. So as you can see, it makes me laugh a little bit. I feel like it's probably one of those quotes that's kind of like a sound bite where there's probably a broader context and more to it. But yeah, I think that's interesting. So my experience has been oftentimes actually the opposite, is that the data itself is sometimes neutral or even boring, right? However, it's the insight that kind of quote unquote punches you in the face, right? Or shows you something that you didn't expect. So that would be kind of generally my take on it. I think oftentimes these days, especially with the advent of big data, you have gigabytes, terabytes, even in some cases petabytes of data where when you glance at it, or you do kind of a preview of your data in a cloud data platform like Snowflake or Google BigQuery or et cetera, you see it, you're like, okay, great. I have 80 columns of data. I have 5 billion rows. So that's what I mean by, in a way, it can be boring at first, right? You see it, you're like, okay, I need to do something with this. But then what's exciting is that insight. So using various algorithms to kind of deal with the sparse data, impute values that you need for your analysis in your model. That's exciting. And then also I'd say the visualization layer. So when you get far enough down the pipeline or the process where now you want to showcase the insights, especially to executives, that's really cool. And I think data visualization itself winds up being an art. But if you can, through that medium, through let's say Tableau or Looker or Power BI or what have you, you're able to show executives something interesting or something that they didn't necessarily think about or didn't jump off the page from their spreadsheet. That's really where I think it's the most exciting and you get punched in the face, right? So that would be my take on that. But yeah, if there's any more context on that question, happy to chat more.
And no, I guess that's a perfect response. The context was in general about analytics itself, and that's when we started talking about, and this statement was made, and that was fascinating. Actually, it is kind of a hard hitting statement, so it kind of stuck with me until now. So yeah, so
That's
let's move
great.
on to the next one.
Sure.
And so, can you give us a couple of examples of where analytics has made some ground level impact, whether it is ROI, whether it is growth, revenue?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And I think that's, as a preface, super important because, people get excited about these new algorithms, Gen AI, et cetera. But what it really boils down to is business value. And I think that's one of the biggest things for leaders to work with their teams on is making sure, despite the shiny new object, despite the Gen AI, despite the deep, neural network, despite the machine learning algorithm, that it's bringing value back to the business because, excuse me, that's what the actual executives care about. So I think it's a good question. I'd say at the ground level, a handful of years ago, I'm not going to mention the company for privacy reasons, but a handful of years ago, I was working at a company where we were trying to win a bid for a larger deal with them. And this is a retailer, convenience store chain that has thousands of doors globally, but specifically in the United States. And what we did was we took some of their data as a sample and said, look, before you sign the contract with us, give us as much data as you're willing to give us, and we'll comb through it and find some insights. So at the ground level, what that meant was basically doing a clustering exercise for their stores to show them, okay, just across the United States as an example, not all stores that are in the same city have the same value or the same story, right? Just because you have 25 stores in Chicago doesn't mean that all those stores are the same. You could have them in different neighborhoods, they could have different sales trends, different patterns. So what I did was, put my data science hat on with my teams, and we built essentially a visualization layer for them so they could see that, look, actually, based on the characteristics that we have derived, using some data science methodologies, I should say features, doing the analysis, we were able to derive features that were the most important predictors of sales for those stores. And then we were able to group those stores together. So essentially, what we did at the ground level is we were able to show the executives at this client that, look, actually this store in Pensacola, Florida is, store, let's just make it up, 1001 is actually more similar to store 656 in Manhattan, right? Based on the types of products you're selling, the time of day that those products are selling, all the way down to the characteristics of those products, right? So I'd say at the ground level, that was eye-opening and almost punched the executives in the face, right? Because we were able to open their eyes and show them that it's not as simple to cluster stores to just look at geographic features. You also have to look at all those other features that I mentioned, and then there were plenty more. And we also looked at things like bringing in external data, which I think is super important, right? Because you look at macro trends across the United States, you can look at, or any country, you can look at that GDP, but then you can also break it down to a specific state. And then within those states, you can find those cities or areas that are those primary sales drivers. So that was eye-opening for the executives because that informed the way that they plan inventory for those stores. Because then they realized, okay, wait a second, we're throwing away, or we have a lot of waste for X, Y, or Z products, and we're selling a lot of ABC products. Maybe we need to focus on optimizing the inventory for ABC products because those are the ones that really sell. And then instead of comparing, store 1001 against other stores in Florida that happen to just be in the same or a similar zip code, actually we should compare those sales trends to another store. So of course, it's all relative. You still want to know how sales are doing geographically, but the point is that you want to build some sort of similarity index, as you often do in data science, to compare stores, compare sales, things like sales velocity. So for me, that would be I'd say one of the more recent examples of that ground level impact. But like I said, with my teams at any of the companies I've worked at, I've tried to really bring it back to the business reason and the business value. So we always try to show that ground level impact. So that could mean either top line growth with revenue or bottom line growth to things like profit and EBITDA. So yeah, hopefully I answered your question.
It does actually, and it's quite fascinating because data analytics is just one part of it. I wouldn't say one part of it, first half of it. What drives is the actual profit, P&L or EBITDA, as well as things like inventory forecasting, or even waste management, as you mentioned, which kind of is the actual second half, which is more important, which is the actual punch that you talked about. So that's quite fascinating.
Exactly.
That's true.
Yeah, for sure. And I think just adding to that, with any of these analytics or data science projects is, generally, you want to start by working with the business, understand what their objectives are, and then, like you said, you typically formulate some sort of hypothesis or agreement with the stakeholders you're working with, and say, okay, either they're looking for this return on their investment, or they're looking for this reduction in cost of goods, right? And those are generally the angles that you can take at a high level, and obviously when you work with at a company, or if you're in a consulting capacity and you're working with a client, you want to understand what that means to them in a more detailed way. But high level, I think it's really about that, that ROI or that cost savings, because either way, that's money that goes to the bottom line or to the top line. So yeah, absolutely, totally agree.
Moving on to my next one. So analytics is something which takes time to see impact, right? I mean, it's not like a tool or a software that your company starts to use and you can see impact from day one. Analytics probably takes time, probably a month, to, or even more at times. So in this scenario, right, what is your key mantra to convince say prospective customers or even leadership for that matter, about the impact of analytics? And how do you convince them to say that, okay, we are here, we are more important than, or we are as important as other teams are typically?
Yeah. No, great question. Yeah. So I'll give two answers. The first answer is I'm slightly joking. I'd say the mantra is it's not magic. So many companies from, the companies you find on the S&P 500 or the Fortune 50 or Fortune 100 all the way down to the startups, when you have executives who are not necessarily particularly technical or they don't understand data, they don't understand analytics, what I've often seen they do is they make an investment. They want to bring in 3 or 4 or 5 technical team members, whether they be data scientists or BI analysts or data engineers. And then they just think, okay, great. Now all of our problems are solved. We can deploy a recommendation system into production overnight, and we could do this store clustering exercise, and it's not magic, right? It takes time, and I think that's my half joking mantra is make sure that you're building the foundation and the frameworks to empower your teams, right? And not just think, hey, look, we're going to burn the midnight oil and just crush it with a handful of folks, right? It takes time, it takes a team, and I think that's part of being a leader. But what I would say, my mantra would be in a slightly more serious way is more, it's about increasing speed to insight, right? So whether you're working with executives at your current company internally, or you're working with external stakeholders, that's really what it is about. And even and cascading down to things like generative AI, right? You want to increase speed and insight, you want to increase efficiencies because that impacts your top line or bottom line as well, right? And I think that's really the thing to focus on is we want to do what we want our company to do what they can better and quicker, right? And in a more accurate way. So I think that would be my overall mantra is that it's really about efficiency and all of these new tools and technologies, specifically things like Gen AI. That's the real value they provide, right? You still want to have that human in the loop, but what's nice is you can offload a lot of the heavy lifting initially to some of these models now, right? The algorithm being the logic on the model being the program that you create to actually solve the business problem.
It's interesting that you brought AI into the discussion. And one question, I wouldn't say one, yeah, probably a question that I have in the whole AI realm is with the algorithms or the models available publicly these days, do you see a pattern or a usage pattern of AI models being increased in general, especially because of the fact that the accessibility of these AI models have become more easy and they're more accessible than they were probably a couple of years back or even more?
Yeah, 100%. I think what you're starting to see a lot more since January 1 this year is the impact of AI and analytics, right? And I think a lot of times people are focusing about data science. I think sometimes it's a matter of semantics. There are differences though, right? Analytics, data science, ML ops, LLM ops, Gen AI, there are definitely differences. There's nuances. So to some, maybe it seems the same, but I think within the analytics realm, you are seeing a change where AI is making things easier, right? Now you have your domain experts that are able to interact with artificial intelligence, apply it to things like analytics without having to know how to code, right? And that's important. And that's something that in a recent interview, actually, Jensen Huang from NVIDIA was talking about is that you can take those domain experts, someone, let's say, that specializes in biology, and now allow them or enable them to interact with AI without having to now go get another degree or spend 5 years learning how to code, right? So they can bring that domain knowledge, that domain expertise, and then you see a real efficiency play there again, among other things. Another example I'll give you is with Google, right? Even I believe it was yesterday they just announced one of their products that they've been working on called Duet AI is now going to be available within the Google Workspace. They've decided to kind of deprecate that name on some level and just integrate it with Gemini, right? I forget exactly what they're calling it, but Gemini something. So that's applicable to things like BI, right? Because one of the things that Google did a couple of years ago is they acquired Looker. and they've been integrating Looker into their product ecosystem, right? That's their essentially their BI play. So now you have AI combined with analytics, and that's super powerful, right? You're gonna superpower, put a Superman cape on your BI analysts and your web analysts and even your analytics engineers, right? So I think it's really about enablement, and we'll see a lot more of that this year, where um, AI will continue, in my opinion, to get integrated into the background of a lot of applications, even those that BI analysts use to really, be their superpower. I think at some point, whether it's this year, next year, or the year after, is you're not going to know as much that what's happening in the background is Gen AI or LLM based. It's just going to increase those efficiencies, and then it's going to become table stakes. People are going to start to expect those types of features to be available across the whole, suite of products.
Thanks, thanks. And do you see the expectations from the customers or the leadership changing or growing with these advent of AI models and Gen AI or LLM models?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think when executives start to realize the value proposition that it can really offer, that will come. I think at this point, a lot of companies, apart, as they say, excuse me, apart from the kind of the Magnificent Seven, the Apple, the Meta, the et cetera, Google, apart from those companies that are actually creating the foundational models or the AI or the platforms that other companies are using. So any of the companies that are just trying to deploy, leverage those technologies and deploy those types of models into production, once those things start to happen more, executives will see by the end of this year or sometime next year, like, wait a second, okay, I see now the value. We used to need 10 developers to do this in, 2 sprints. Now we need 6 developers and we can do it in 1 sprint. Then they'll start to expect more, right? Because of course, if you can do it, the whole project management framework, right? If you can do it in a shorter period of time with fewer resources, and stay on track on that critical path, you can, there's all sorts of opportunities for increased profitability, et cetera. And just, again, back to efficiency. So I think executives will expect that. It'll still take some time outside of that Mag 7. But yeah, hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, that's true. That's right. Actually, you nailed it. I'll move on to the next, or the probably the last question of this podcast, and we touched upon a bit of this, and just expanding on that. That analytics after analytics, what? Now, we did discuss a lot of impact of analytics in the whole pipeline, which is more inventory management or wastage management or even P&L or EBITDA. Do you foresee this pipeline or the data pipeline getting extended more towards supply chain management, SCM tools, etc.? Because right now, I believe the analytics part stays and it stops there. Do you see a play that getting extended towards a much more integrated or much more automated solution, whether it is integrating with SCM solutions or ERP solutions for that matter?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I think analytics has been important in a lot of the different industries you're mentioning, right? Supply chain planning and optimization, fast moving consumer goods, et cetera, et cetera. Analytics has been a part of that, but now all of a sudden, with the advent of things like Gen AI, you're going to see that become a lot easier and a lot more ubiquitous. I've worked for companies that invest heavily in supply chain planning and optimization, right? Generally, what you're doing in those situations is you're building, linear optimization models or programs, right? To optimize for a certain set of factors and basically make a recommendation. This is what you should do at this time and this order, right? So I worked for a Dutch company that we did that with the Quintix software. And with Gen AI, I think what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to interconnect these pieces a lot more, right? Where these companies that have been niche operating a little bit in silos will now have the opportunity to kind of level up and then integrate and build these solutions that are fully integrated. Now, One could argue that, well, that's always been possible, but I think now with these increased efficiencies, that's going to be even easier because companies that are large, companies that are small, they often have a small army, especially the large companies, they have a small army of people building models, analytics, whatever you want to call it, in these different business areas, whether it's finance, whether it's supply chain, digital transformation, digital innovation, marketing. And the issue becomes integrating those. So especially with the large companies, this winds up taking years because they spend, a year or two building and refining these models. They start to integrate them. Then they need to integrate them more and more and more. And essentially what all these companies are after is some sort of master algorithm where they can input these set of features. Could be, financial things like COGS and different KPIs, but they want these systems to talk to one another. And I think that will make analytics more interesting, is because if you can increase the speed at which you can integrate these systems, you can then do more robust analytics. Because a lot of times when you do analytics, you build a report on a certain domain of the business. But then the executives, they're scratching their head and they're thinking more broadly. Okay, well, I understand the analytics for this, for our marketing ROI. How does that translate to X, Y, or Z across other areas? Now you're going to be able to integrate those things more quickly. It'll still take effort. It'll still take a small army, at least for now, of software engineers or Gen AI experts to do that. But I think that's what we're really looking at. If you look at like the job market right now, I have a lot of friends that were laid off at the big tech companies, so I've been kind of helping them out a bit, look for some new roles. The job market now it's really robust for software engineers, right? And it's to do exactly that. It's to build these things and integrate these things in a quicker way. I see a lot of software engineers and product managers. So that's what you need to do this. And I'm excited for 2024 and the next few years to see what that means, down the line. What is the result going to be, right? Because you're still going to need people that have that business knowledge to kind of oversee what's happening. But yeah, hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, you did. And to expand on that, I believe when you said integration, yes, it always existed, but even though it looks a simple task from the outside, it does take years. This is from personal experience, right? And I believe with unsupervised learning, the Gen AI impact will make it much more easier than it actually was a couple of years back, or even now to an extent. So yes, I mean
100%.
that does.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's also exciting, just to add to that too, is if you look at a lot of these cloud data platforms, you look at Snowflake, you look at Databricks, you look at Google Cloud, they're making these huge investments, acquiring or investing in startups to make a lot of this external data that you want to integrate easier, right? So that's super powerful because now you're not spending all this time web scraping and data munging. You're still doing that, but it's centralized, and you have these Snowflake marketplaces or otherwise. So it's built into the cloud platform. So now you've got all these internal data sources, so this first party data, you have these external data sources, and now you have the power of Gen AI to do exactly what you said, right? So all of a sudden, again, like my thesis here is it's an efficiency play, right? You can increase your efficiencies, you then increase your speed to insight, and then your whole planning cycle accelerates, your analytics cycles accelerate. So yeah, that's what's the most exciting to me. That's what kind of keeps me up at night, no joke. So for sure.
That's great actually. So we stop here, Michael. It was great talking to you. It was fun. Thanks a lot for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Also, very much enjoyed the conversation and look forward to chatting soon.